Hello everybody, and welcome to this full build and history video of the Tamiya P38G Lightning and Operation Vengeance. We'll be jumping through the cockpit build quite quickly in this video, but if you're interested, there's a link in the description for a full video of the cockpit build where I'm also using the Edward detail set. So check that out if you're interested. I decided to get the Edward detail set because it has proper seat belts, but also to avoid having to use Tamiya's thick decals for the instrument panel. In the end, the instrument panel isn't that visible in the cockpit, so was it worth it? Maybe, maybe not. Your mileage may vary, but in the end, it looks good. Especially with the raised levers and switches and knobs and such. And as many other people have said, the cockpit doesn't actually require any glue, I think. It snaps together just beautifully. With the cockpit and radio compartment getting finished, it's time to move on to the front wheelbase. Unfortunately, my camera started acting up, so I'm missing some footage, but here you can see me attaching hydraulic lines to the front landing gear using 0.2mm brass rods that I match up to the hydraulic lines that have been attached to the sidewalls. One way of making brass rods easier to work with is to heat them up and basically until they change color and turn slightly purple. That way they become much softer and it's a lot easier to shape them into the shape that you want. Weathering is done with Starship Filth oil brushers that has been thinned down to a wash. I'm using a thicker wash in the crevices to make them more visible, and the flat surfaces are coated with a very thinned down version of the same. Here I'm using a sand-colored oil paint to make everything, well, more dusty. This particular aircraft was stationed off Guadalcanal in the South Pacific, so it makes sense that the wheelbase would be filled with dust in the crevices. The excess oil paint can then easily be blended or completely removed by using a brush slightly dampened in white spirit or other thinners. I haven't used oils much, but I like them. The P-38 Lightning came out of a 1937 specification by the United States Army Air Corps, which called for a long-range, high-performance interceptor that could maintain a high speed at high altitude for at least an hour. The design they eventually commissioned was created by Lockheed, who were still new to making purely military aircraft. It was equipped with 4 nose-mounted 50 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon. With all of the weaponry centered in the nose rather than in the wings, it could deliver a devastating amount of lead both at close range and at long range. It was fast as well, completing the then fastest transcontinental flight across the United States in January 1939 of just 7 hours and 2 minutes. These benefits outweigh the high price, and the Lightning entered service in August of 1941. It could actually be too fast. In a steep dive with full throttle, it could easily reach 480 knots or 885 kilometers per hour, and at these speeds the controls could seize up due to compression stalls, and the pilot would have to either ditch out or trust that thicker air at lower altitudes would give him back control of his aircraft. Later versions would include hydraulic power-assisted controls to help the pilot control the aircraft. With its long range, the P-38 was perfect for the long-range missions typical in the South Pacific, and they would end up destroying more enemy planes than any other fighter in the Allied arsenal. And now we reach the rear wheelbase. Here I'm using AK 3rd generation acrylics for brush painting, which is the brand I'm used to. Whatever brand you prefer that works for you, that's fine. The trick is thin the paint more than you think you might need and apply 2 more layers rather than 1 thick layer. That way you can get a good flat result without any brush strokes. Finding good reference pictures is also helpful, which makes it a lot easier to get colors right, but also to get all the hydraulic lines in the wheel bay as correct as possible. This isn't exactly plasma level scratch building, but it's my first try, so I'm happy with it, and if you're happy with your scratch building, then excellent. The rear wheelbase were weathered in the same way as the front wheelbase, so rather than repeating that, let's just jump straight back to assembly. I said before that the cockpit requires very little glue, and the same goes for the booms. The way they fit together is excellent, and well, as you can see, they stay in place without any glue. The engineering of this kit is truly amazing. However, we don't want it to fall apart, so a little bit of glue is always needed. Rather than using the masking set that comes with the kit, since that isn't pre-cut, I decided to get a masking set from Edward. That also has parts to cover the inside of the windshield and the other clear parts, which makes painting a lot easier, so you can actually airbrush the inside of the clear parts as well. Cleaning the model with isopropyl alcohol will remove all the grease and stains from the model, making the paint stick better. But it will also remove any paint on the model, so just be careful. While I try my hand at black basing for the first time, let's look at the mission that made this aircraft famous. On the 14th of April 1943, US signal intelligence intercepted a message containing the travel itinerary of the commander of the Japanese Navy, Admiral Yamamoto Isoroku, and his chief of staff, Admiral Ogaki, who would travel from Rabaul to Buin near Bougainville on an inspection tour 4 days later. Yamamoto was known for his punctuality, and the message detailed the flight plan of the two airplanes carrying the admirals down to the minute. And although records aren't clear as to who gave the order to kill Yamamoto, whether it was the US President Roosevelt or the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Pacific Fleet, Admiral Chester Nimitz, it was up to Admiral William Halsey's South Pacific forces to do the deed. As it happened, the 18th of April was the anniversary of the Doolittle raid, and a fighter intercept seemed just the thing. Marine Major John Condon planned the operation that would be known as Operation Vengeance, starting on the 17th of April. And rather than flying a direct route, which stood the risk of being spotted by enemy radar or coast watchers, the strike force would first fly out to sea before turning towards the intercept point. Condon decided that Army twin-engine P-38 fighters, if given extra fuel tanks, could make the trip to Bougainville with enough gas to afford them time for the intercept, and the 339th Fighter Squadron got the assignment. The strike force under Major Mitchell consisted of a covering unit of 14 P-38s and an attack unit of 4 planes led by Captain Thomas G. Lanfear. Departure from Cochem Field on Guadalcanal was timed precisely to bring Lanfear to the intercept point just as Yamamoto's planes reached there. The strike force would fly as low as 10 to 30 feet above the waves, relying on dead reckoning with a nautical compass to make the journey. And the strike force took off at 7:25 in the morning, 35 minutes before Yamamoto would begin his own journey. Admiral Ogaki had just been handed a note telling him to expect landing in 15 minutes when lightning struck. Major Mitchell's P-38s came from below. Warrant Officer Yanagiya Kenji, flying one of the escorting Zeros about 2,000 feet above the transports, looked down and saw them under attack. The Japanese fighters were surprised because Allied fighters most often dived from above. Before they could intervene, the transports were already embattled. Major Mitchell's covering lightnings interposed, and Captain Lanfear and Lieutenant Rex Barber made the crucial gun runs. While the American pilots have disputed credit for the success, what matters is that both transports were smoked and both crashed. Yamamoto's in the jungle and Ogaki's just off the Bougainville shore. One of the P-38s was lost in the clash. First Lieutenant Raymond Hind was killed with his exact fate unknown, and the rest of the strike force managed to return to Guadalcanal for tea and medals without further incident. particular aircraft was nicknamed Miss Virginia. It was originally assigned to pilot Lieutenant Robert Pettit, but is the aircraft that was flown by Rex Barber during Operation Vengeance. I've almost only heard terrible things about Tamiya's decals or decals or whatever you want, and I have to say that I agree, they are quite thick and require a lot of setting solution to look halfway decent, and the carrier film is still quite visible. So for any future aircraft, I'll probably be looking at getting aftermarket decals. For weathering, I'm using an aluminium colored watercolor pencil on rivets and in between inspection panels, and I'm also doing a little bit of sponge chipping on the leading edges of the wings, just to make it not look brand new. And to create a little bit more modulation than I was able to get from the black basing, I'm doing an oil dot filter on the underside and on the upper side of the aircraft. I'm using greys, a little bit of browns, and a little bit of the same starship filth that I used in the wheelbase, and a little bit of sand. And since aircraft tend to spend more time sitting still on the ground than they do flying through the air, I'm doing a stippling blending on the horizontal surfaces such as the wings, and I'm vertical streaking on the sides of the aircraft. I like using a sharpened toothpick to apply superglue to parts. That way it's a lot easier to get a thin layer and there's less risk of getting big drops of superglue making ugly stains on your model. The last flight of Miss Virginia happened later in 1943, when the pilot either forgot or wasn't able to lower the landing gear and made a belly landing and was in the end written off and salvaged for parts. The ultimate fate of the remains are unknown. They were likely scrapped or otherwise disappeared in the jungle. The very last piece of work done on this model is the rigging for the radio antennas. And with that, the build is complete, and also this video. So thank you for watching this far, if you made it this far. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, excellent. If you didn't, well, not excellent, but I would appreciate it if you could tell me how I can improve my videos for later. So again, thank you for watching, dear viewer, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. And enjoy the pictures. Bye!